We hope that each of you had the opportunity to view the Partner Network video that was sent out in advance of today's event. At the conclusion, we'll be leaving you with a second video that digs a little bit deeper into the nuts and bolts of the recognition program. But for now, I'd like to emphasize a few elements that we hope that you'll keep at the forefront of your mind during today's experience, really from that partner video that went out. First, Missouri Green Schools takes a systems approach, which requires and benefits from engaging diverse stakeholders. Secondly, it embraces the health of humans and the health of the environment, honoring the complexities of each and the dynamic nature of their relationships with each other. And lastly, by encouraging schools to implement green and healthy practices holistically across their campuses, curriculum, and culture, it invites a wide range of partnership opportunities from organizations like yours. You can help provide the technical expertise, programs, services, and resources to help schools across the state in achieving their green goals. So some of you are newly engaging in the MGS Partner Network, and this is your first meeting. Others have been engaging for multiple years and really informed its development. Regardless, we're delighted you're here today and look forward to working together towards the vision that all Missouri schools are places that promote equitable and sustainable environments that ensure the overall health and well-being of our community. This is our first annual convening that includes a professional development component. Several individuals contributed directly to the planning of today's gathering, and I would like to acknowledge them at this time. Stacy Parker and Ben Freeman, both Missouri Green Schools AmeriCorps Vistas. Hannah Carter, Missouri Green Schools Committee Chair and also Sustainability Coordinator for the Parkway School District. Nick Speed, MIA Board Member and Founder of UGMA. And Leslie Mullilan, Executive Director of the Missouri Environmental Education Association. I'd also like to thank Sister Sharon Horace and all of the MGS committee members for their ongoing support of the program as a whole. So thank you all and welcome everyone. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to my colleague and partner on Missouri Green Schools, MIA's Executive Director, Leslie Moylan.
Thanks so much, Hope. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to kind of transition us into the professional development portion of this meeting and wanted to just kind of frame why we're starting this whole professional development series that we'll be doing every year with diversity, equity, and inclusion training. The Missouri Green Schools vision is that every kid in Missouri will attend a green school, and we're all here in support of that vision. So to move in that direction, we need to embrace every child in Missouri with our hearts and with our minds. As for myself, there are only two spiritual traditions that I can claim to know anything about. Both of them, though, really challenge me to expand my definition of who a neighbor is and who I truly care about. So for me, this is really a spiritual exercise. I don't know why others in this room are here today exactly, but I do hope that you'll join me in entering this space with humility because we all have a lot to learn and frankly, a lot to unlearn. I want you to know that there's no judgment. Again, we have so much to unpack and there's just been so many different experiences that have led us all here to this space today. And I really want you to know that we just have a tremendous amount of gratitude for you joining us and being here at this table. I also have a tremendous amount of gratitude for the Education Equity Center of St. Louis for being here today. They began in 2018 as a program of the Venture Cafe in St. Louis, which is kind of like an incubator of ideas. It's a really cool space in the heart of the city. And that's actually how I was introduced to them in the first place. But the Ed Equity Center works in the region to foster racial equity and some much needed transformation in our education system. So I'm thrilled that today we get to share a training from them with a statewide audience. That's super cool. And so with that, I'm really pleased to introduce a woman I admire so much, the founder and executive director of the Education Equity Center of St. Louis, Sharita Love. Sharita, welcome. We're so glad you're here, and the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leslie. I got a little verklempt listening to that, both that introduction and, just your warm thoughts towards this space, and also the work that we attempt to do in partnership with educators and students across the region. And so thank you for inviting me to this conversation and for setting this table. Also want to share a bit of gratitude as well for each of you for being here today. I know most of us are experiencing some weather related fun. I love winter and I love a snowstorm. So I've been geeking out over the past few days. And so the hope is that everyone is well and warm and safe in this weather. Also, I appreciate, Leslie, you bringing in this piece of humanity and humility throughout this conversation that we'll have today. And so I want to echo those words, humanity and humility, into the space as we journey together over the next bit of time. Cool. So again, excited to be in the room with you all today. Just going to invite just some voices in our virtual space, inviting you add and bring yourself into the space, inviting like where in Missouri you're joining from. Add that to the chat, and then what's your organization affiliation role. So just inviting that you drop that into the chat really quick, just to bring yourself into this room, and then invite those of us on the call just to take it in, just to see where everybody is coming from, who's in the room with us, and what they do. So it'll take a few seconds to see that. Some Springfield. I got some Springfield connections. My daughter just graduated from Missouri State in the spring. Earth Dance. Girl Scouts. St. Louis Aquarium. Oh, hi, Diane. Erica, Red Circle. Glad you're here and glad you're better. Okay, I'm just scrolling. Wonderful to see all the different organizations, folks represented here, all in the best interest of serving kids in our great state. So again, just inviting everyone on the call to take that in. Who are the folks in this space with you? Thank you. And so as Leslie brought me in, I am Sharita Love, the Executive Director of the Education Equity Center. And through these 4 pathways, our hope is to build a coalition of anti-racist educators and students who lead the systemic change needed for a fully equitable education system in the St. Louis region. And today, this is a bit about our time, based on conversations that I've had with Leslie, and what the hope and goal for us to walk away as a collective, having a conversation about, spending a little time unpacking. We've welcomed you into the space. We're, doing some introductions, or have done some introductions, bringing our voices into the room. We'll do a bit of virtual community building, ground ourselves in some language and histories that have gotten us here, while we have this explicit focus and these explicit visions around a fully equitable space for students in this state. We'll spend a bit of time looking at our current state of education, just teasing out a few examples. There's much that we could cover, but we'll tease out a few examples. We'll talk about our shared experiences and what we define as rural and urban Missouri school, and then think about ways that we continue to cultivate partnership. You know, having you all in this space, the Missouri Green Schools, and working on partnerships and ways to connect the work that you do across the state. What are some things that we can think about understanding our own responsibilities, ways that we can continue to advocate for more equitable space and education support programs for all kids, and then some actionable ways that we can think about what that means for us individually and connected to our institutions. So that's a bit about our time. And as we continue to journey, I want to bring in an acknowledgement, acknowledging that although we are gathered virtually today, that we all occupy the physical, traditional, ancestral lands of those who were defrauded and forcibly removed from them. I'm joining you from Ferguson, Missouri, a county of St. Louis, Missouri, and home of the following tribes: the Osage, the Miami, the Illini, Chickasaw, Quapaw, Sac, Fox, the Iowa, Kickapoo, and Oglala Lakota tribes. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans whose unpaid labor built Missouri during the colonial era and beyond, with a legacy that continues to impact the lives of Black Americans today. Through this land acknowledgement, we hope to remind ourselves and our partners of the enduring legacy of colonialism, diaspora, and enslavement at the hands of the US government, while expressing our gratitude to the indigenous and enslaved Africans who are the stewards of and who built this land. And so we do lean a lot on the philosophies of both those who do tons of research and work around systemic change, around racial equity and justice, particularly those who think about the humanity of all on this planet, and particularly those who, again, drill down into what it means to center education in the ways that we collectively work towards a more just world. James Comer is one of those people, and one of my favorite quotes that we use is community first, then the work. We build community ahead of attempting the work. There is no work without relationship. And while we're in this virtual space with 57 of us on this call, and while I wish that we can do so differently, we will make the best of our current situation. And so I want to just invite us to reflect about our work in a way that centers what we do and the impact that it has on the people that we serve, young people, directly or indirectly. How does that work positively impact the lives of young people? So take a few moments to reflect on this question. And again, just inviting you to add that to the chat such that we all can take that in. And I know sometimes it's tough for us to think about ourselves and, give ourselves a pat on the back saying that, oh yeah, I do this to positively impact someone, or yeah, I do have an impact in my community, and I do have an impact through the work that I do. And so I just want to open the space for us to have time to reflect on that. How does the work you do positively impact the lives of young people, whether that's directly or indirectly? We'll take a few moments to respond to that and invite us all to take the responses in. I'm asking permission, and I'm going to read in Bonnie, what you shared. We directly involve young people in helping their local environment, and we indirectly impact future generations of young people by keeping their rivers, streams, and parks in better shape for their enjoyment and use. That indirect impact to future generations, lifting that up. Paige, impacting youth we work with, giving them a sense of community with each other. Absolutely, extremely important. Yes. Erica, we create space to allow kids and youth to know how awesome they are, plain and simple. Keep taking those in, keep adding those reflections, sharing the impact, the actual impact of the work that you're doing. Thank you. Thank you. I want to offer, as we continue to do this, continue to add those into the chat. I want to offer some courageous space agreements, kind of echoing some of what Leslie shared. Again, centering our humanity, centering community in this space. Just offering some agreements as we journey together. Offering that we lean into what's possible. A lot of times we can get marred in the oppressive nature of the work of racial justice. And I'm speaking today, of course, particularly around education. And offer that there are other possibilities. There are many, many folks alive and those who are ancestors now who have gotten us to this place because they dreamed of something different. They dreamed of different and new possibilities. And without us leaning into what's possible beyond what sometimes we see as a reality, it can keep us stuck. And so in our conversations today and an offering for your continued work, I'm going back even to what was brought into the chat, future generations, right? Our impact on future generations, lean into what's possible. That we wrestle with the history and the reality of race, place, and class, understanding that those are always in operation. Every institution, every situation, there's a reality of race, place, and class that is at play. And that we, through this conversation, wrestle with that. That if you bring your voice in, if you are engaging in the conversation in the chat, as most of our time we will today, that you speak for yourself using I statements. I know that's one of the agreements that I generally need to lean into the most, just because sometimes I can generalize and not use my own experience. Understanding that, of course, I don't speak for all women, I don't speak for all Black women, right? I can only speak for my experience. And so offering that as an agreement for us all. Offering that we resist the urge to qualify our statements. Again, if we're bringing ourselves into our voices into the chat or even into the space. And what we mean by that is that sometimes qualifying statements serve to separate us. And so as an example, I'm middle class, so, right? And so if I qualify my statement by saying that, immediately some of us might pick up, oh, that means that you're not like me, or you're not like your colleagues, or you're not like the students you serve, or you're not like, right? So just leaning into that possibility of resisting the urge to qualify your statement in that way, if that makes sense. That we release expectations of perfection of this space, this virtual space. We know that there's often, technical difficulties that happen. We live in a real world and there's realities. We have to take care of ourselves. Kids may be at home from school with a snow day, just all the things. I have a 1.5-year-old lab that's laying right at my feet, and she is a handful. And so this is a real life that sometimes I might have to look over and say, hey, just this space won't be perfect. We don't have to be perfect, right? We can just lean into what is happening, what is at this moment. And that when we have these conversations about inequity, moving towards a more fully equitable, when we have conversations even about anti-racism, racism, like all the things, that we acknowledge, honor, and process the feelings that are associated with that. Sometimes we try to separate that from our professionalism and our work, but we are human beings having a human experience. And this is very much race, and racism is very much a part of our American society. And so that we allow space, whether that be here or after or journaling or just taking note of something that pricks us, that we acknowledge and give ourselves time and space to process those feelings. Remember our breath. You'll see me, hear me, maybe even audibly, breathing through comments or breathing through some of the content that we'll share today. And so it's very important that we remember to be in our bodies and to breathe through anything that is necessary. That we give grace, that we accept grace from one another. Again, no judgments, as Leslie brought into the space, giving one another grace for what might be said that needs a bit more clarity, and that we accept grace as well in the space. And that again, we just let this space be what it must. I pride myself on making the most beautiful slide decks in Missouri. And at the same time, the slide deck means nothing if there's something in this space that we need to dig further into, or even if we need to push something aside, right? So we will let the space be what it must. And just gonna invite, I'm gonna scan the room, inviting if there's anything that anyone in this space would like to lift up as an agreement, that you either bring your voice in or drop it in the chat. Otherwise, if you can agree, going to invite either your virtual or analog thumbs up. Okay, it's going to allow, thank you, scanning the room. And just allowing also, like I said, just a few seconds here. If anyone needs to bring their voice in and add anything that they want us to hold on to during our time, or invite you to add that into the chat as well. Okay. Right. All right. Reminding us to center young people in our conversation, in our thoughts, and our work today, whether that be bringing kids into the room with us and centering them, whether it be your younger self, your own children, children in your family, or the children you serve in your various roles. They are the reason for the work that we do. And so we want to bring them into this room and into this conversation with us. And just a quote to ground us. As I said, I'm leaning on the wisdom of Jason Reynolds, who says that we cannot attack a thing we don't know. That's dangerous and foolish. It will be like trying to chop down a tree from the top of it. If we understand how the tree works, how the trunk and the roots are where the power lies, and how gravity is on our side, we can attack it. Each of us with small axes, and change the face of the forest. Each of us with small axes and change the face of the forest. It's a great reminder that it takes all of us in strategy, all of us in our individual spaces to change the face of the forest and move towards the vision that we have for a more equitable society, more just society, and particularly for the work that we do, a more just education system. I'm going to bring in just a few definitions, knowing that definitions are a good starting point for imagination. What we can imagine can't come into being. This is leaning on the philosophy and words of the now ancestor Bell Hooks, who passed away a few weeks ago. Understanding that, having some type of shared language, I can't assume that everyone on this call knows what we mean when we talk about diversity or equity, diversity and inclusion, anti-racist. We can't assume that everybody's on the same page. Each of us is entering that understanding of language in a different place. And so just want to offer a few definitions for us. Let's see, move things around so I can see. Okay, and so just a few definitions for us to think about as we continue the journey. We talk about diversity. What actually are we talking about? We're talking about diversity simply as a variation, having different types of people from a wide range of identities, different perspectives, experiences, etc. And equity in education, centering that for our conversation. For us, the way we're defining that in this space is removing the predictability of success or failures that currently correlates with social or cultural factors. It means examining our biases and creating fully inclusive environments. Inclusion, simply putting diversity into action, creating an environment of involvement, respect, and connection. Particularly centering the richness of ideas and backgrounds, perspectives, understanding that the value that it adds to institutions and our systems, programming, etc. And then we talk about ARE connected to DEI work, which is anti-racist education, meaning to be actively conscious of how bias and racism operates within every institution, and to be committed at an individual level, at an institutional level, at a systemic level, to institutionalizing policies, procedures, and norms that contribute to equity, the goals of equity. Also, one piece that I think as a society, as a collective, we all are still trying to understand, connected to anti-racism, is this accountability to Black, Indigenous, and people of color groups. And again, this is something that we're all trying to understand a bit more of. We don't have time, right, to unpack what that actually means in this space, but that is a part of it, right? What does that accountability look like on our boards, in our schools, in our programming, in our staffing, in the ways that we're led by the community and what the community needs are and what they say, and we're centering the Black, Indigenous, and people of color group voices over the dominant cultural voice. And so what does that actually mean? Again, we all, because of our socialization, still have a lot of work to do in that area to truly understand and start to live into that more fully. Any thoughts, questions about any of these definitions before I move on? Feel free to add that in the chat or bring your voice in. Okay. I don't believe I'm gonna walk through all of this, but simply want to just lift up a few points when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racist education in particular, because we always want to highlight the fact that they are connected. It's not necessarily one or the other, and that one approach is better than the other. They simply put, they build upon one another, right? They're connected in that way. And so when we talk about anti-racism, again, it's scrutinizing the systemic way in which we've gotten here, the history, the codification legally of practices and policies that have gotten us to a more inequitable society, an equitable education system, where we even need to have the programs that are represented across this community today. And when we talk about the definitions of diversity and understanding its importance, it's important to have the most full representation, right, of different types of people, whether that be race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, etc. That's very important in order to achieve the work that you want to do towards equity. And it's that activation both of including them, listening to them, following their leadership and direction in our spaces, and scrutinizing, again, the systemic ways in which racial oppression and structural inequity occurs. Thinking about it as individual acts of prejudice, etc., very important. And that doesn't necessarily shift systems. So that systems approach that Leslie brought into the conversation at the very start, that's where when we talk about being anti-racist, because that's so much of a part of our society. It takes that work to interrogate systems level ways in which our policies and practices perpetuate inequity, rather than focusing on individual acts of bigotry, stereotyping, etc. And hopefully that communicates. And so I want to share one of the philosophers, and some of us have always kind of prefaced this. I'm going to share this quick video from Dr. Robin DiAngelo. I always preface Dr. DiAngelo's work with the fact that her work, her philosophy is brilliant. She's done work over many, many years in the space of thinking about both systemic inequity, racism, and its impact on K-12 education and even post-secondary education. And some might say that Dr. DiAngelo in her work and in her practice does not cede power in specific ways to people of color in her work. And so I always want to caveat the humanity, right, before bringing a voice into the space, that some of us may agree with Dr. DiAngelo in the ways that she approaches her work. Some of us may not. But what I want to invite us to do is listen to the ways that she brilliantly draws these connections between the power of education as a vehicle to what's the word I'm looking for? To reproduce inequity in our society. And she argues that education is the central vehicle that reproduces education and equity in society. So just want to invite us to take her words in over the next few moments and really think about, although most of us in this space are not classroom educators, we are those who support education as support organizations and entities. We are all affecting the lives of young people, right? This is all connected to education. And so how do we think about that connection in the ways that Dr. DiAngelo invites us to? So just hold that as you take in her words.
So I'm curious to know if you have done much work with educators and if you see any applications for your work specifically in K-12 school settings.
Absolutely. I am a former professor of education. So I've worked many years in large teacher training programs. To be really blunt, I think our education system is the belly of the beast, along with Hollywood, basically. Hollywood pumps out the stories, the images, the representations, and schools reproduce inequality by basically being sorting mechanisms, and our schools sort children into unequal places in society. I think everyone knows that. If we didn't know that, we would not care what schools our children went to. But do we care what schools our children go to? Oh, yes. And will we go across town and to great inconvenience to get them into a better school so they have a better chance? Even as we say, gosh, we don't know any people of color in our neighborhood, so how are we supposed to get to know people, right? We'll make effort where we want something for our children. I think teachers are critical, and I think regardless of intentions, when you have an overwhelmingly white teaching force, right? We have a very racially homogeneous teaching force. You inevitably have the reproduction and the dissemination of racism and white supremacy just by virtue of the homogeneity, right? Most of those white teachers grew up in mostly white neighborhoods, went to mostly white schools. Rarely, if ever, had a teacher themselves who wasn't white. And that's just the teachers. We haven't talked about the curriculum, the testing, the tracking, the funding, right? Schools are just incredibly efficient at reproducing racial.
And so as we have taken into account what has been shared so far, what Dr. D'Angelo just brought into the room. Just want to invite either reflections in the chat or your voice, what's speaking to you loudly so far. Any questions, reflections, clarification that you're interested in bringing into the space. Ralph brought into the chat, striving to learn how to eliminate racial bias. I've attended several sessions trying to understand the problem. Sorry, I don't know what this is, but maybe getting a feel for the issues. I realize that knowledge and understanding is a step. I need more focus. I need more focus on learning about solutions and applying them. What else is speaking loudly to you so far? Again, you can bring your voice in or add reflections in the chat. Kimberly, I'm aware my organization is 99.9% homogeneous and as much needs much more education on how not to keep perpetuating bias and racism in our forest service culture. Mm-hmm. Did I hear someone come off mute? Yeah, and just, reflecting on the 2 comments that were added into the chat so far. Yeah, the truth of how we will go out of our way to meet our needs. How we will go out of our way. Very important comment there. To meet our needs. We need to stretch further to address equity. Absolutely. I see you, Paige. Go ahead, bring your voice in, Paige.
Okay, yeah. So, hi, Sharita. Yeah, I just thought we'd talk a little bit so you don't have to feel like you're talking to yourself.
Oh, no. I'm used to it.
But I just like to add in that, as I'm hearing her talk about, the issues in our education system, that it's something that I can say is true to my experience growing up in the American education system. And as I reflect back on my own experience through school, like I can see a lot of what she's talking about happening. And and something that I didn't notice at the time as a kid, but then obviously reflecting back as an adult, I can see those things that were occurring in my school, but not really like thinking much about.
For sure.
I wonder if everybody feels that way or if it sparked things for them too.
Yeah, there's a lot of us, I think, I know, Paige, that have similar experiences just because of the setup, right? And oftentimes we don't start to think about that until we have different experiences as we get older. We go away to college, or we get a job in a different, area than we grew up in. And it's like, wait a minute, there's a whole different world, and folks have totally different experiences than I do. Why didn't I know about, right? And so, hopefully that causes us to interrogate the setup. Like, there's a very particular reason why, most of the time our neighborhoods look a certain way, comprised of a certain group of people. It's by design, it's by design. And so when Dr. D'Angelo talks about, education being the belly of the beast in that way, and, when even I center, education as a vehicle of reproduction, like we come into that system and we get socialized with our curriculum and those who look like us and those who don't. We get messages about who we are, both in spaces of education and in society, our worth, our roles. And we come out of that system and we reproduce it. We continue to play those roles in society. And so when we have something that bumps against what we know and what we experience, it could be like, okay, well, is that true? Is it what, right? It can be a disillusion. And to some of the comments that were shared in the chat around action and pushing I'm gonna not get the exact quote, but basically like, we have to basically push ourselves out of our comfort zone to do this work. We have to push ourselves to get, to get out there, to really understand what is happening and the ways that we may reproduce it, perpetuate it, and ways to mitigate for that. And so, it takes that commitment. Like that comment connects to a commitment. What commitment do we have? Both from our own personal experiences, having that commitment, but then as an institution, as an organization, what commitment will we have in our policies, in our practices, what at a board level? What are the commitments that we'll make? And then how do we interrogate the data that we have about our programs, that we know about our communities, and start to put in some type of action, right? Oriented goals or action oriented plan. I'm trying to go back to the comment about like, I kind of understand what's happening, but I'm looking forward to thinking about ways to be actionable and making a change. And that's, of course, the way to think and the way to move towards the work. And we understand just the enormity of the architecture of inequity in this country, when we understand the very nuanced ways that it works through laws and practices and policies and the ways that it's reinforced by institutions. While action, of course, is a goal, and we want to be moving towards actionable ways of being, we also want to push back against the notion that we have to be doing something, give me a checklist to create change, because it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. I would be a very rich person if I had a checklist to say, oh, if you do A, B, and C, you'll be there and you'll be done, right? And so it takes us with those small axes, trying to change the face of the forest, looking at ways that in our own spheres of influence, in our own institutions, organizations, and lives, how we think about integrating that change and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. Nice. And I was also reading over other comments that were brought into the space too, and reflections just about the conversation we were having before break, and want to make time ahead of us closing out, just for some closing reflections related to those comments. So I just want to lift those up for folks to go back and read through if you haven't had a chance to, and just name that. I won't leave those hanging. I want to, at least add some comment thought to what was shared in the space. So thank you. So I'm gonna keep us moving here, during a bit of time, just interrogating how this shows up across our state. Bringing in the voice of Richard Brockstein. Many of you may know his work in writing The Color of Law. He also wrote one book more recently that specifically focuses on Missouri, St. Louis, called The Broken Heart of America. And Richard, in one of his quotes, shares that we have a national myth that the reason our metropolitan areas are segregated is for informal reasons, private prejudice, differences in income, demographic trends, racial steering by real estate agents, and so forth. And the reality is that the segregation we see today was established by the federal government with help from state and local governments. It's an officially established system. Officially established, not by happenstance. And so we drill down. I'm just going to take a few moments to just drill across a few different spaces. Again, this is not a holistic history. This is not a holistic way to view. We just want to kind of pull out some examples to draw a narrative of like how we've gotten here to this place. And when we think about just the ways in which we thought about education, in one of the sessions we generally cover, we'll talk a little bit about the history of education, which some educators will know, maybe have heard about and understand education was not established to be this great equalizer to, support all men and women to, achieve their best goals, right? It was established for a certain few, a select few. And the rest of us were to fall in line and be the industrial workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or some of us were totally excluded from education, right? Education was not a right for everyone. Everyone could not access education in the same way. And so just with these few examples, just want to, again, tease this out and bring it into the room. So thinking about the history of institutional racism and how it created this invisible chain holding down students of color. Thinking about the limitations, like I mentioned, the denial to access to education. It really established and created this culture where students of color were treated as less than. And we think about the mindsets that carry over time that is still deeply rooted in our education systems today. Much of our conditioning or socialization, all of us are affected by. It's not just white folk. All of us are affected by the messages that we receive about who has value and who does not, who has worth, who does not, right? And so we think about those biases that are exempt from history, thinking about, more recently, the stories we heard about Native children being found in burial sites in Canada, so thinking about, that history, that forgotten and mostly erased history, and what it really meant, right? It wasn't, just mean folks who were torturing and murdering children. That was a part of the way in which we were eliminating Indigenous people. We worked to eliminate Indigenous people. Those boarding schools were to socialize, separate children from their families and socialize them into white ways of being and culture, erase and strip away their history. That is what fundamentally those boarding schools were for. And then that education as a tool to reproduce this stuff, it was used to assimilate them, again, forcibly assimilate them into white culture. We think about our Asian brothers and sisters, how this has impacted them. Instead of forcing them to assimilate into the prescribed white education system, Chinese American children were barred completely from going to school. And of course, there was later legislation stating that they had the right to public education, but segregated education. So again, this methodology that separates and shuts folks out based on their race and based on who they are. And again, we know about the laws in the South, time over time, hearing about segregation in ways that it was illegal for African-American children to learn how to read and write. African-Americans at the time having to establish separate schools, be very subversive in the ways that they would learn. And of course, the violence that would and, often ensues, right? That even just made me think about even now, the state that we're in. Someone brought into the chat, some of this conversation that we're having even today about banning books and critical race theory and these things that are trying to roll back, right, progress. And there's always this violence and turmoil that is connected to that. I don't know if many of you have been following the news around even historically Black colleges and universities, the bomb threats that they've been getting, having to cancel class, right? This use of force and violence, is even pervasive today. Doesn't look the same in most cases, but it's pervasive today. And this is a drill down, mainly focused on St. Louis. This is from the Still Unequal report that Ford through Ferguson put out a few years ago, thinking about how the data tells us the story of the impact of this, thinking about de facto segregation and its effect on public schools and the concentration of who's in what school and who has access to certain curriculum, what funding looks like and how funding impacts the ways in which folks can access a quality education. And not just because if I live in, North County in St. Louis and my school district by certain measures is not the same as a Ladue school district, it is not because of the people in the neighborhood, right? It's because of the funding formulas that we know. based off of property taxes, and because of divestment in certain neighborhoods and certain areas, that's going to look different in a Ferguson versus a Ladue. Thinking about environment. And this is true across our urban areas, as well as our suburban, as well as our rural areas. The pay, like what are we able to pay teachers based on where they are? And that has a direct connection to the quality of educator that you receive, who has more tenure, who has more experience versus a less experienced teacher who, right, will have a certain impact on student education and outcomes. And I've already talked a little bit about property taxes. So the data, of course, tells us how those historic legacy of the historic legacy of policy has real impact and continued impact on our communities. These are just a few examples, a couple that are St. Louis specific, a couple that are across the state. This is from the Sake of All report done in 2014 out of Washington University, in culmination with a few other data-rich institutions across the region and country, thinking about that connection between health and education and the ways it affects us all, and the real life or death implications of what it means to experience inequity, and who you are determines your life outcome. So thinking about the economic loss, and this again was from 2014. We don't have updated data on this as of today, but what would that look like right now? Thinking about, again, that concentration of poverty. And what does that look like when it comes to educational outcomes? And if you think about equitable access, or more equitable access, the impact that it would have, how many more kids will be enrolled in schools where more students meet state standards in English and math. And thinking about, again, the trajectory that this puts our students on long-term, attending and completing college, being able to acquire the jobs that we hope that would produce citizens that are leading full and healthy lives, right? There's a real impact there. Thinking about out-of-school suspension rates and the school to prison pipeline, and thinking about the ways that also, plays into that narrative. I won't, beat the horse with this one, but want to put this in front of you. The real life impact. And then thinking about the disparity that Dr. D'Angelo talked about, that most of us on this call are aware about who's in front of our kids, who leads and teaches in the classroom, who are the leaders of the organizations represented on this call, what's the demographics and the composition of our organization, and how are they represented, representative of our communities or not, and what is the work and interrogation that we have to do to ensure that there's a different level of representation, because we know, again, it has real impact. How do you see and or experience this playing out in your role? I'm going to invite for this question, I'm going to invite some voices rather than chat reflections, if there's any.
Oh my gosh, this is such a complicated question.
Yeah.
An example that I can give, and this is a personal example for me and my family. We have a 5-year-old who is our grandson. We adopted him, we were raising him, and we are fortunate enough to be able to put him in private school. And we've got snow days right now. And the homework, he's in kindergarten, the homework that he's bringing home is first grade level homework. I mean, it's like he's writing, he's reading. And I know that isn't the situation. We're a 2-parent household, and we're able to put him in private school. And I know that the public schools, the teachers and the frontline people are doing everything that they can. But I can't even imagine like a single mother with 1 or 2 children doing it all by herself, or a single dad or someone else, a family with, you know, a large family doing this with the public school. And it's just seeing the differences. And also, you know, I know there is a lot of debate over how we keep our children safe, but I can tell you that I know there's no conversations that are going on as to what the private schools are doing to keep their children safe. Like, are they doing the same thing that the public schools are doing? Are they making their children, like the school? I mean, our experience right now, we're very fortunate. The school that our child is going to, when he goes into the building, there's not as many children, so he gets more attention. When he goes and enters the school every single morning, the principal has a table there and greets every single child. Every child has to be masked. The parents don't come into the building, and the children are each given hand sanitizer as they go into the building, and they're eating in their classrooms. I don't know that that's going on at other locations. And I know that there's debate and there's argument and everything, but you know, for us, just knowing those differences and the impact that they're having on children, and we feel that he is getting a major advantage. And we are not wealthy, but we're very fortunate to be able to do this. But a lot of people aren't. And I'm angry, and I'm not even involved because I feel that the public schools parents who are sending their children to public schools should be having that same assurance and experience with their children. And I don't know if that's happening across this country. And it's just very unfortunate. And there's so many things I could keep going on about, but give it to somebody else. But just that alone as a personal experience from where we're at, I see that, and it's very upsetting.
Yeah, knowing that, you know, some choices, some spaces, you know, it makes me think of the conversation I'm having about, you know, where I am, you know, in the district that would service my daughter versus the school district that's not even maybe 10 miles away, and the vast difference of option and availability and school experiences and access is very different, and it should not be that way, right? Like, and there's no reason for it to be that way. There's so many. Again, it's all by design, right? So thank you so much for adding that reflection. Maria, am I saying your name correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Hi. I was just, you know, reflecting on, you know, what we've seen with the schools that we work with is just how the pandemic itself has really crystallized a lot of the inequities in the school system. And, you know, that had to do with everything from, you know, who had access to internet when they got home, who didn't have access to internet, who had laptops or computers that they could actually get onto, you know, et cetera. But it also brought to, just crystallized again, the inaccess to, the unequal access to nature and to safe places outdoors. There was this, everyone was being told during the pandemic, you know, get outdoors, exercise, it's healthier outdoors, you know, You know, well, those schools that had outdoor spaces potentially and you know, green classrooms, et cetera, some of those kids could get outdoors in a safer setting, but they couldn't necessarily go back home and experience that. So again, just huge inequities between kids that were able to go home, go out and walk the dog and go to the park and feel safe doing that, and other kids that couldn't. They went home and they were inside, you know, often with a family of 10. So, you know, just huge inequities crystallized by the pandemic and all of the health implications associated with it.
Absolutely. What a great example, you know, bringing that in, that environmental, like the built environment, right? And environmental racism is a huge thing. I'm, you know, thinking about research, and I probably won't get this particularly right, but in essence, you know, it made me think about even the built environment in certain areas where there's higher concentrations of poverty, were hotter because they don't have like the trees necessary and all the things that would in certain neighborhoods that both beautify, but then also add some protection. Like the actual built environment is very important in this conversation as well. Really good example of how that shows up in schools. Like I know the school that I went to when I was younger, like we didn't even have playground. Like, well, we had a blacktop. We didn't have like swings and things like that. And I just remember not long ago, I've been married to my husband 16 years, and we, for whatever reason, had this conversation and talked about, he was talking about like how he would play in his school and what the playground looked like. And I was like, oh, we didn't have any of that. It was just blacktop and a couple of benches. And he's like, what? It was totally surprising, but it was my reality. It was just the reality, and it just was. And so again, that illustration of the multiple ways in which this plays out, this illustration of the nuanced ways that this plays out for folks in our community, for kids, families in our communities. Thank you for that. Jill, bring your voice in.
Yes, I'm a former classroom teacher, and on this topic, it takes me back to Dr. D'Angelo's comment on belly of the beast. Mm-hmm. And I think perhaps a great way to think about how we move forward is an example of a solution that really worked. Mm-hmm. And in the school that I was working in, required parents to participate 30 hours a school year. And it could be in a variety of capacities to meet their individual needs. But just as what was mentioned in your quote by James Comer, community first, then the work. And it was having those parents engaged with the classroom for that amount of time. And not that everyone did, but that was the intention, really built that community, whether it was coming in the morning and reading a story to the class, or coming in at the end of the day, or taking materials home to cut things out for an art project. It engaged them with the students. They had the ability to see their child amongst their peers. And it also brought community into it with the other parents. And we saw a lot more of, hey, could so-and-so come and play with so-and-so? And, the parents engaged with each other. And through that sense of community, education improved for all, and especially on the social, emotional levels. Mm-hmm. Just, again, a model of excellence.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jill. Thank you for sharing that. And connecting that to the importance of built community and us being in community with one another to break down barriers that, these invisible barriers that, separate us. Absolutely. That's extremely important. Ralph, you want to bring your voice in?
Well, thanks, Sharita. I appreciate your comments about urban heat island effect and tree canopy. And
yes.
I was just thinking about those right before you brought that up. So as an architect, I've come to understand the connection of access to nature in schools, views and sunlight and fresh air are really important to the emotional and physical well-being of our students. And schools often, want to shortchange that. They want to have less windows. They say that sometimes the children will be distracted or other things like that. But it's important that those views are backed up by things that are beautiful and connect people to nature. So it's, one, it's important to have those kind of views out to see what's happening in the world around you and be connected to the world. Secondly, it's important that those views are of something that connects to nature, not big, parking lots or things like that. So the landscaping component in the outdoor environment is very important, as of course is the indoor environment. So that's a real important issue with the wellness and the ability of students to perform well in schools. Secondly, this issue has been covered. This issue of urban heat islands been covered in National Geographic. It was covered in the talk. One topic brought up in the School of Public Health from Harvard on Monday about tree canopy and and how important that is to cooling the environment and creating better living conditions for people, especially in the urban environment. And Black populations and Latino populations in general have much less tree canopy in their urban environment than other people do. So, you know, those lead to serious health issues. They lead to increased pregnancy issues and problems, you know, that extreme heat and so forth. So these are important in our school environment as part of that environment, and they shouldn't be shortchanged and given second shift. And secondly, you know, as an architect, the indoor air quality is, you know, super important to the well-being of students and attendance and reductions in asthma and so forth. So it's not just filtration systems, you know, that are important in the air movement. It's things like the materials that are used in the school, you know, that go well beyond, you know, lead paints and things like that, which have been banned for many years. So many materials now can be selected to reduce the off-gassing of harmful chemicals, you know, the floor coverings, the paints, the wall coverings, the ceiling materials, even the furnishings. So, you know, making sure that, you know, the schools are putting in things that don't smell and don't, you know, off-gas things that are harmful. We still see those things going in a lot of cases. So, you know, those are a couple of things as an architect and interior designers and educators should be aware of, and administrators should be aware of, that those are important issues that do help school performance for all children and faculty as well.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, you know, detailed reflection and for giving us the proper language. I'm sorry, I was blanking on the research and the terminology, but thank you so much for bringing that in and giving us that proper terminology. And it just beautifully explaining, like, you know, the impact and the effect and the importance of that. Absolutely.
Well, thanks. You did a great job. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Leslie, want to come in?
Sure. I just wanted to also highlight that several of the things that folks have brought up, like, you know, sterile campuses and parents who do or do not have a lot of discretionary time. I mean, these are things that affect a lot of our rural schools as well. So I just wanted to lift that up.
Thank you. Hope?
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, something that's coming to my mind are, you know, we're talking about huge systems on so many scales and in so many different contexts. And of course, schools in themselves are these dynamic systems with different people making decisions. And I'm hearing a lot about, you know, the curriculum and how we're engaging students, both in remote learning and in person. I'm hearing about, you know, school culture in general. And I'm hearing about the built environments, the actual buildings and the grounds. And there are different people within the schools that are responsible for all these different aspects, for maintaining or conducting, you know, all these different things. In addition, of course, to parent involvement, which can be right now in the pandemic. I mean, there isn't any, or there isn't any, there is a lack of community building taking place, I think, in many scenarios. But this is just a reflection. I hope I'm going somewhere with this, but it really involves these team approaches. It really involves getting many different people from many different perspectives that have the ability to make changes from different angles, top down, bottom up, all sides, to get on board and really make connections with each other and understand that the decisions that each of these individuals, whether it's the facilities manager or the teacher or the principal, you know, how their decisions impact all of the students and the work of all of the other individuals. And so just particularly with like the Missouri Green Schools program, one of the things that's at the core of and foundation of that is trying to build these teams within schools that have multiple perspectives and broadening what we mean by, well, different individuals have different perceptions and definitions for sustainability, but you know, equity and wellness and, you know, all of the very important things we're discussing today are part of that. And so bringing the counselor in and the nurse and everyone else. Okay. Anyway.
No. Yeah, thank you for that. Because even just that connection and reminder and lifting up of, like, all of that is a part of sustainability. Because if we don't make these things a priority, like, we will not last as a collective community of humans on this earth. Like, that is absolutely a part of sustainability. If we think about climate change, right? Like, what is the outcome, right? If we do not address what is happening in our world. So yes, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And it's another big, complex, overwhelming.
Yes. Yes. So you added that in the chat, that overwhelming sense of, it's so complex and there's so many moving parts. And so how do I begin again to, with my small axe, change the face of the forest? And that's a piece that we, you know, you have to interrogate. You have to interrogate for yourself. Like, what does that look like for me in my individual lives and my interpersonal relationships and the connections to the systems that I'm a part of, whether that be education or sustainability or architecture? What does that look like for me in my sphere of folks and the coalition that I'm going to build, whether it be inside this place or outside this place to apply pressure? What does that look like for me? Jamie and then Gina.
Cool. I've been sitting with Gina's words and Hope's words and Mara as well. But yeah, the pandemic really kind of laid bare, like, all of these, to even the most privileged people, how schools perpetuate inequity, and the rush to get kids back into schools without adequate safety measures just really illustrates this capitalism's need for kids to be in schools so that parents and caregivers can get back to work at all costs. And I feel like this is, like, amplified in districts where parents and caregivers might be working more in low-wage jobs, the same jobs that people have been calling essential or front lines. And I truly believe that education for the actual liberation of children requires an anti-capitalist lens. I'm really struggling with understanding my role in changing the landscape of education in both my job as an education coordinator with a nonprofit, as well as the Missouri Green Schools Partner Network. And I really, I'd like to have more discussion around what our roles could be in changing what education looks like.
Absolutely.
I work 2 jobs. I work this job and then I work in another like radically child-led learning community. And the duality of those 2 different approaches to education it's hard to navigate sometimes. And it's a lot to sit with what our impact can be working inside the existing system versus working to create new systems. I'm not always sure what the best answer is.
You said so much. You said so much, and you brought in, like, some real truth bombs that I gotta let hang. I just have to let it hang, because yeah, that's a whole nother session. That's a whole nother session. And again, it keeps going back to, you know, hope and, you know, what others have said just about the complexity of this, that even that decision of, I think about, like, you know, the other day when school districts were announcing, you know, whether they were closing or not because of the weather. And I think about, you know, connected to that was, are we going to do virtual learning, or are we going to allow students and families to have their snow day here in St. Louis anyway? And St. Louis Public Schools, you know, the St. Louis Public Schools, and Dr. Adams, he made the announcement on Facebook, and his announcement and decision was for, you know, of course, for schools to close because of the weather, but then also that they would, you know, not honor the fact that they had a few snow days built in, but he wanted them to go ahead and go to virtual learning. And just the pushback of that is connecting. I'm connecting that to your comments just about, you know, the need to, yeah, So thank you for sharing. And I'm going to share my email in the chat as well for a continued conversation. Gina, then Emily.
Thank you.
Everything she just said, I completely agree with. The pandemic is it's exhausting, and we've been through so much, and we will continue to go through more, and it has revealed a lot. I also feel that if we can collectively take a deep breath, this is an opportunity for us to make change, big change. And I feel that, yes, we're tired, and yes, this is very, we need to make so many changes, and there's a lot of pushback, or there are powers that want to push us backward. And I feel like this is an opportunity for people who are unique thinkers and creative and able to make things happen. Like, for example, Missouri Green Schools. If you can make such a huge impact, we can make such a huge impact in our communities just by doing what we're doing. And that involves bringing the people in our community or at our jobs or the people that we work with or our families to the table to do things differently or implement things that work and help everyone. So I don't want to leave anything that I've said where it's all negative, because I feel like the way to balance or correct that is to think out of the box, or do things that we see that other people are doing that is working for their community, working for their family members, and sharing that and then implementing it in our own communities. And it also means that as individuals, we're going to come forward with ideas and things that others may not have thought of, and they might think are unique. But if it's something that you really think will work and people get on board, I say we try it. One example, I shared a story about outdoor classrooms. I've seen some stories during the pandemic where children are actually, elementary school children have backpacks and they go out into nature. And that's part of their curriculum. And I think that is epic. I mean, that's something we should be doing everywhere, or finding a way to make something to our children are out in nature. And also, I agree with the education. Yes, we need to have the tried and true education techniques, but we also need to be inspiring children to do things, like to think creatively and to implement things. And I think not just for our kids, but I think for our personal lives, we should be finding ways to do things better. I mean, this is a time where many of us, or all of us across the world, probably cherishing our friends and family and looking at our lives and trying to figure out how to make them better. And I think that, all of this is a part of it. And it's a great opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, that this is an opportunity both for a collective breath here and for us to think differently about what's possible and what could be. So I'm gonna take Emily, and then we're going to move to close.
Hello, I just wanted to say that we're talking about these ideas of sustainability and wellness and taking action to combat climate change. And so many of these things that we're talking about directly also tied to disability, which disability rates are often higher in African Americans, Latinx populations, and other groups of people of color. So just that through our work with this, disability can also be addressed as well.
Absolutely. I'm dropping something in the chat related to that. One, thank you for that reminder. Emily, right?
Yes.
Yeah, lifting that up.
Oh, she's good.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if it's crutches in spice, or and spice, but You'll find her on Twitter, Facebook, if any of you are on social media. And I'm just looking it up, quickly in connection to what you were sharing, Emily, as someone who is a leader in this space, who identifies as disabled and does a lot of work around disability justice for Black and Brown communities. So it's a great learning. She's a great person to follow and learn from. And again, like when we talk about, the intersections of race and racism, that is often a left out community, right? And when we're following the leadership and direction of those who are most marginalized and targeted, we can come up, there it is. Thank you, Amani Barbarian. Yes, thank you, Trenton. And so when we follow the leadership and direction of those who are most impacted, who are often forgotten, we come up with some more holistic solutions. So again, thank you for that. Keep adding any reflections that you have in the chats. I want to be respectful of time. Again, we let this space be what it must with the conversations that needed to happen in this moment. I will, of course, share resources. If you're interested in the slide deck, I put my email in the chat. Always interested in continuing the conversation and supporting in any way that I can when we're working towards this goal of full equity, both here in St. Louis, but across this great state of Missouri. And so just a few things that I want to lift up and highlight before closing is our shared experience, right? Like often we're, one of the ways we talked about that, inequity does reproduce itself is pitting us against each other, keeping us separate, both mentally and physically. And so when we have this conversation, particularly around this notion of rural and urban Missouri, of course, it looks different, right? Spatially, it can look different, doesn't always mean that it does look different. And they're very different experiences. Missouri is actually a rural state, right? and both rural and urban communities lack resources in ways that provide students with high quality in education. Students from both communities are disproportionately impacted by systemic injustice and face barriers to academic success. The reasons might be different, the way it shows up might be different, but we both have that shared experience. It's just our mental models, our framing, the ways that we approach and support these areas look different. And I think it's because of some of the ways that we are conditioned and socialized to think about that difference. There's ways that we think about, I'm going to move past this. There's ways that we think about and have assumptions about who is in rural areas. We have some stereotypes about it, that it's white, right? Rural equals poor, and that folks live in cultures of poverty, that schools are invisible, right? There's large representations of who is in our rural schools and our rural areas, but because of the lack of resources, often, again, the same as in urban or poor areas in the city, urban or poor areas across this state, there's still, because of the lack of funding and being able to support high quality instruction, high quality teachers, we experience some of the same inequities as far as that's concerned. There's also the ways in which research and conversations about policy and support and funding that most often rural areas are left out of those conversations and decisions. And so some of those assumptions of ways that they play out and impact and affect education in those areas, again, is something that we must interrogate. Same as with our urban, and I keep quoting urban because, again, language is important and we have to interrogate language in the language that we use. Although we're defining or using urban in a certain way that most of us on this call understand, urban also can just equate to Black or poor. And that is not, we want to distinguish the fact that that is not true. And so there's some assumptions, stereotypes that we can have. The Black equals poor. That is not right? True or the case. I was on a call with a partner most recently, and we were talking to their board. We're doing an equity audit for their school, and their board, we were, just supporting them, asking them questions, what would you like to see? And as we started thinking about ways that they were going to hopefully diversify their board, automatically the conversation started to switch to, oh, well, and I'm paraphrasing. If we diversify our board, that means we have to reduce the cost that we ask people to donate. And if we diversify our board, we have to think differently about our financials in this way, in that way, and that way. And so I was very clear to say, hey, I just want to lift up what I hear you saying, how this is communicating to me. I know this is not your intent, but the way that this communicates to me is that if you bring on Black and brown folks onto the board, therefore, they won't be able to afford what you ask for and request in donations. Therefore, we have to think differently about the ways that our money is going to flow into, right? And so it was an immediate like, oh my God, that's not what we thought. Okay, intent versus impact, right? That is not, I'm sure that wasn't your intention, but this is the way that it's communicating. I just want to lift up and remind you, like you have a mental model that says Black, brown equals less money. And that's the way that is communicated. And so again, because of the messages, the socialization, the imagery that we see, all of the things that tells us urban equals Black equals poor, those are things that we have to interrogate. That is absolutely not true. That parents don't care, urban schools equals bad schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this one thing, it's particularly for those of us who work in these programs that support education, that are not necessarily within the school, K-12, day-to-day, classroom space. Oftentimes there is this mindset that of helping, fixing, and saving. Let me even backtrack that a little bit. Sometimes with our white, it's particularly young white teachers who come in to the education system, there's also that notion of they need me to save them. They need me in my work to help fix and save. So again, things for us to interrogate, things for us to think about differently, that we are partners with, and we are doing this work alongside the communities that we support and serve. It is not a top down, it is a next to, it is a side and in partnership with them. So just want to highlight those things. And so I'm gonna just move us forward again, because I want to be conscious of time. Again, going to share the slide deck here. Let me go back. So some of the things that I want to talk about really briefly is connected to a few of the comments that were looking in the chat. And I think that we kind of, started to have a conversation about that as you all were bringing your voices into the room, talking about the ways that, this is so complex and it's overwhelming, and what actions can I take and what do we need to do, that type of thing. Lifting up this reminder that this work is a journey, like this vision that Leslie brought into at the top of our conversation and call this morning, this vision where it connects to systems change, and that every school in Missouri is a green school. Like, of course, that is big vision, big picture, that is imagination, that's leaning into possibility and what could be possible. And it's also transparently out of reach at this moment. And so when we think about this process, it's a practice, it's a journey. It's not a destination that we will arrive to. And so we think about, again, the ways that we personally can make our commitments based on our capacities, our influence, the folks that we're connected to. What are some of the things that we can do to commit individually and connected to the institutions that we're a part of? What are the ways that we need to educate ourselves, learn and unlearn, right? Like Leslie invited us to think about. What are the communities that we can be connecting ourselves with? What are the ways that we can hold our institutions accountable? And not to say we're racist, we're too white, we need to do this. That is not what accountability is. Accountability is more about partnership and conversation. So what are the ways that we can think strategically, and not as individuals, as a collective of people? Because one person is a martyr. One person will not change or move a system. It takes a collective of people, both in either inside a system or that outside pressure, that to build that capacity and to build that coalition towards change. And so when we think about the personal and interpersonal and institutional and structural ways that, racism operates, it's also those things that we need to commit to be able to move the system. It is 11:45. You said you needed 15 minutes. So I am going to stop talking there. Again, I'm going to share this. We do capacity building sessions. I know Leslie wanted me to bring up the Saturday school sessions. This is our next one. We're focusing on critical race theory, what it is, what it isn't, and how we, particularly in Missouri, can do the critical work of continuing to educate our children in a holistic and truthful way. And I'm going to pause there. Thank you very much for your time and attention this morning. Again, I'll share my contact information and you'll have access to this deck. I'll share it with Leslie.
Thank you, Sharita. That was a wonderful session. And as I continue to reflect on what I learned and unlearned today and interrogating some of my long-held beliefs, I'm also going to take care of myself. So this is really hard work. So before we transition into our next session, and if you want to, but I'm going to do it, I hope you join me. I'm going to take a deep cleansing breath. So we talked a lot about breath during the session. So I'm going to breathe in for 4 beats, and then I'm going to breathe out for 4 beats. All right, ready, and breathe in. Okay, and I'll give you a moment to do it again if you like. Okay, all right, so in our next session, we're going to showcase some of our wonderful schools that are enrolled in the Missouri Green Schools program. And as you view the presentation, think about how your organization or business can help them achieve their goals.
Thank you so much, Parker, for sort of the healing, mindful moment, and to Sharita for the fantastic presentation. I'm working on getting our Sharon up here. Sorry about that. Oh, now it's not playing.
Thank you for your interest in the Missouri Green Schools Partner Network. While we can help describe the benefits of the Partner Network, the schools you're helping can do a better job showing off both their green goals and their amazing achievements. Here are just a few examples of the amazing schools that we've recognized for their work.
Old Central Primary School in Ferguson, Missouri. It's in a wonderful neighborhood. We are a member of the Missouri Green Schools, and one of our dreams, one of our goals is to change this atrocious, dated, hideous, blacktop, impervious, impermeable blacktop into a safer play space that's filled with areas for growing greenery, and for science learning, and for community activities. I would like to see a dream fulfilled before I retire.
Hello, my name is Hannah Carter, and I'm the Sustainability Coordinator at Parkway School District. Parkway School District has a wide variety of sustainability goals, such as reducing our energy and water use, diverting more waste from the landfill, educating students about sustainability topics, and improving indoor air quality. We have a goal to reduce our energy use by 35% by the year 2025. In order to do that, we partner with a wide variety of organizations working to improve our schools. We know that energy reductions are critical in reducing our building's carbon emissions, as well as saving money that is better spent in the classroom educating students. Recently, Parkway has partnered with a retro commissioning firm to do fine-tuning of our HVAC systems that utilize energy in our buildings. We have also worked with a wide variety of companies doing envelope improvements, lighting retrofits, and solar installations on every district building. As a school district, these partnerships are extremely important and valuable in giving our students real-world applications to sustainability, as well as reducing the environmental footprint of our buildings.
Hi, my name's Danielle Peppers. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator here at Sunrise School. We'd like to show you some of the past projects we've done and some future projects we have coming up. Come on inside and I'll show you around. We participate in several recycling challenges with materials such as plastic film, aluminum cans, and hard plastic. The hard plastic is taken to a recycling center where it is shredded, melted, and then poured into molds to make composite boards for raised garden beds. We hatch a variety of birds throughout the school year and even have our own laying hens. At lunch, students recycle and compost daily. Our newest program is Feed the Pigs. We've purchased several pigs to feed with leftover lunch scraps. Then they are auctioned off to school families for them to consume. They are fed approximately 40 pounds of scrap daily. Vegetables from our greenhouse and garden are sold at our produce stand and served as a side at lunch. We have 2 tower gardens that students harvest and prepare from for classroom salad parties. Sunrise has a 22-acre outdoor classroom. Teachers use the space often to teach a variety of topics. Our future plans consist of installing science and fitness stations throughout the trail, conducting an 8-stall barn to house a variety of farm animals for K-8 classes to help raise.
Hello, my name is Jill Hollowell, and I serve as a board member with the Missouri Environmental Education Association. I'm also on the committee for Missouri Green Schools. And with that, MIA gives me the perfect venue to expand my goals to connect with kids, connect with schools, and connect with teachers. And a good example of that is that last year for Earth Day, with COVID, so many of the Earth Day celebrations were being canceled. So a few of my fellow Earth mothers, we all got together and developed what we call the Earth Day Stewardship Showcase that features just Missouri. So we collected videos from across the state and put them all together and created an Earth Day showcase that we're very proud of.
All right. Thank you, folks, for putting up with the false start there. It's always super energizing to see the amazing work our schools are doing. Thank you so much for being here to learn more about their work, to learn more about our work, and to learn more about how you can assist schools on their journey. We have some brief updates to share about the Missouri Green Schools journey as well. First off, we'd like to invite all of you to take the Missouri Green Schools Partner Network survey if you've not done so already. We've streamlined the survey a little bit and expect it to take between 20 minutes and about 45 minutes maximum, depending on the specifics of your organization, how many programs you have, your capacity, etc. While this may seem highly detailed, the survey is the official entry point to the partner network, and it offers us the information needed for our next big project, which is going to be a searchable database that we're launching Q2 of this year. This is going to be hosted on our website and will be used to help connect schools with potential partners to support their upcoming work. So they'll be able to go in there, see local relevant partners to reach out to. We are also hoping to launch our regional hubs sometime this year. There will be one hub for each Missouri Department of Conservation region, And we're currently seeking coordinators for all 8 hubs that we're going to set up. If you're interested, you can add your name to our hub coordinator interest list, which we'll drop a link in the chat for that and for the survey as well. We also have a survey about future partner network convenings, what times work best for everyone, how frequent the meetings should occur, PD ideas, and a space to ask any questions you have about our work as well. The link is in the chat, but we'll also make sure all of this is emailed out with the recording of the meeting and some of the resources that we discussed as well. So with that, we've got a couple of minutes here. If anyone in chat or in the call has any questions about anything we've discussed today, anything they've seen about the partner network, or any other clarifications that we can help out with. Do you have a copy of the questions that are on the survey so we can prepare ahead of time if we have a lot of programs or information? That is something that I can email you. So if you're interested, I would be happy to get that together. We do have a PDF form. It's going to look a little bit more unwieldy than it is just because it sections out each program separately. If you do have 5 or more programs, that's kind of where we cap out, is at 5. So after that, you would just be emailing us details anyways. To give a sense though, we'll be collecting information about how large your staff is on those programs, what MDC region those programs are offered in, how representative your staff is to the students that you may be serving, and approximate reach on how often you're working with teachers, how often you're working with students, how often you may be working with sort of other parties, professional development, or whatever it may be. If you don't offer direct educational programming, the survey does look a little bit different and it is a little bit shorter. So that'll be in the same survey, but it'll just skip you ahead to the end where it discusses the services that you do offer to schools. We've got another question coming in. Oh, nope, we've got a email address for me if you want to email any questions as well.
Thank you everyone for coming. We are so delighted that you were here. Hope, do you have any last thoughts to close us out? I just really appreciate Sharita and the time that she spent developing the program for our group, and to our team that put this all together, and for all of you for being here. It's great.
Yeah, I would just echo that gratitude to Sharita and to each of you for being here today. And we look forward to continuing to connect and work together on this moving forward. We will be sending out links to the surveys that were mentioned. And again, that's the MGS partner survey that'll collect information about your organization's offerings, as well as another survey with the opportunity to help gather support in your area, the hub coordinator it's called. Across the state, we're seeking to develop those hubs of centralized support. And then lastly, there will be a survey on additional professional development that you're looking for, and all the other resources that have shown up here today. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to continuing this work together.